trouble is not my fault. All this I also lose my friends, I lost my baby that is looking crack. Only today want to change. He wanted us on the cookie and try more like to feel. I'd kill the real, take your life in a second. The devil drinks coffee in my kitchen, I mentioned it in every song. I just wanted to go away. You decide to stay in the well. I want to be forgiven, I don't like this kid for money. Sorry I was scared, you're not the way it feels. Like to sleep waiting for someone to come in and kill you. The final thing is that now I'm not afraid of anything. Go they gonna kill anyone that feels so powerful. They check by you every your skin up, everything is confusing. You will be good, but you will be more. You will be good, but you will be more. You will be good, but you will be more. Alone every day, it is a praise of pleasure.
Good morning and welcome to Dynasty 365, where the film will set you free. I know it's been a while since my last episode. I just had to take a little break to regroup and figure out my strategy moving forward. And I also joined a 20-team offense and IDP league, so I had to dedicate a lot of time getting back to looking up current startup ADP, which was good as I haven't done a startup in multiple years and knew I needed to get that done and be on top of where everyone's going in order to make my trade calculator. And I also made a couple mistakes in my draft, but that also helps me because it helps me realize my actual true values for these players. I'm pretty excited for this league as 20 teams with the amount of starters we have. I think 17 is quite a lot. And this is a tight end premium league and very tackle heavy IDP scoring. So I'll just share my team with you real quick and where I thought I went wrong. I drafted at the 16th spot, and my first pick was George Kittle, as Travis Kelce had been off the board already, and Kittle is 4 years younger and just broke the receiving yards record for a tight end. I did not select Zach Ertz because he is 3 years older and also has Dallas Goedert nipping at his heels for playing time, so I think his production takes a slight hit, but I was pretty set on either going Mahomes, Kelce, or Kittle at this pick, and I'm glad Kelce was taken to make my choice easy. Following the turn, I selected James Conner as my running back. We only have to start one running back in this league, so I do kind of wish I would have waited on a running back, but my third round target would not have been there, so I'm fine with it. I think James Conner is being vastly underrated by the community right now, as everyone expects Jalen Samuels and or Benny Snell to steal a lot of work, which I don't see happening. I think Samuels is going to have his own role, but he's not as good of a runner as Conner right now. He's more athletic, but not as good of a runner. But I do wish, in hindsight, I would have went Antonio Brown, since we have to start 2 wide receivers and only 1 running back. In the third round, I took Cortland Sutton over Jarvis Landry, Corey Davis, Tyreek Hill, Tyler Boyd, and N'Keal Harry. Now, if I would have known that the left tackle for the Bengals was out for the year, I probably would have went Boyd, but it was definitely between those two for me. Landry is just too inefficient and isn't going to see the target volume that he saw last year. Corey Davis has Marcus Mariota as his quarterback and hasn't shown the ability to be able to beat the true number 1 corners in the league, and I think Cortland Sutton is going to develop into a receiver that can. Maybe I'm wrong, but I loved what I saw from him on film last year for how raw he was supposed to be in year 1. He still has to work on his routes and his hands, but he's got the agility and athleticism to do so, and he already wins contested balls at a great rate, and this was with Case Keenum at quarterback. Now, Joe Flacco probably isn't much better than Case Keenum, but he's probably better. I also, as you know, have Drew Lock ranked as my number 1 quarterback out of these rookies, and I envision Sutton and Locke to develop a strong rapport pretty early in both of their careers. In the fourth round, since I missed out on Patrick Mahomes, I took Aaron Rodgers, who I believe has lower passing yardage stats this year, with a likely more run-first offense, but I like his touchdown numbers to rise, as Allison should be healthy, and MVS is reportedly doing better in training camp. In the 5th round, I got a little risky, but they're players that I believe in. I traded away one of my 2020 firsts for an extra 5th round pick in the startup, as I believe I will be a top 10 team, and this is about where the 10th rookie is going. So as long as I can hopefully make it to the playoffs, I will have quote unquote won that trade. But anyways, keep in mind this is tight end premium. I drafted Chris Herndon and Mark Andrews back to back. I loved what I saw from Herndon last year. He doesn't have any competition at the tight end position in that offense, has a young quarterback that used the tight end in college and used Herndon last year when he finally became to be a part of the offense over the second half of the year. And he also got over 500 yards as a rookie tight end. So if I just take his rookie production as a floor, I'd love to get more receptions, more yards from Herndon this year. I should also mention that there's a 40-yard play bonus, and Herndon definitely has the speed and athletic ability to score those 40-yard chunk plays. I drafted Mark Andrews also, the tight end for the Ravens, who also got over 500 yards receiving last year and broke multiple plays of over 40 yards. There's also been a lot of reports of Andrews reporting much bigger, stronger, and faster than last year, and that news put him about even and maybe even slightly ahead of Chris Herndon, because Herndon has the probable 2-game suspension for a DUI, and then he's got a bye week in week 4, which is the same week as George Kittle. So in order to make sure I could cover that position and hopefully be able to start 3 tight ends on a regular basis, I grabbed both Herndon and Andrews to cover the bye and the suspension of Herndon, but these are also my breakout picks for tight end, and I wanted both, so I took them. In the 6th round, I also made a pick that I regret looking back in James White, but there really weren't any more good wide receivers or running backs left. I could have doubled up with a quarterback, but that would have felt like a waste of a bench spot to me, and there is a possibility that Connor gets injured or somehow loses a starting role, and I don't see any targets that are really going to be soaked up in that New England passing attack. As Brady ages, he likes to throw short passes. James White is a great pass-catching running back, and although he might be variable week to week, if I do have to rely on him as a starter, I feel comfortable rolling him out there. In the 7th round, I took Roquan Smith, linebacker for the Bears. This was more of an upside play than anything else, as Roquan took a little bit of time to be brought into that defense and have a near 3-down role, but even then, he was still a top 10 linebacker last year on, I believe, the most efficient defense of all time. The Bears lost their defensive coordinator, a safety, and a corner in free agency, and the odds of them just having a historic efficient defense again are so low that I could easily see Roquan Smith being the top overall or close to top overall linebacker this season. I followed that pick up with my second receiver, Robert Foster from the Bills, who is an athletic specimen that runs great routes. When I want a wide receiver, those are the two things I really want. Catching is always nice, and he does have a couple drop issues, but the way he looked at the end of last season, running routes, making Stephon Gilmore look silly, showing amazing long speed, with a quarterback known for the deep ball that was targeting him early and often over the last 4 weeks, I'm fine playing him as my wide receiver 2 and racking up those 40-yard play bonuses. I don't see John Brown as a threat. After watching the film on him, he is nowhere near as fast as he used to be. He cannot get off of coverage as easily as he used to be, and I don't think he is going to replace Robert Foster in any way. Zay Jones has way worse drop issues than Foster and was the clear number 2 over the last 4 weeks last season, and Cole Beasley is a good slot receiver but isn't all that athletic, so I was basically taking my shot at the future number 1 for the Bills. I do find it probable that they draft a receiver next year, but if Robert Foster develops the way I think he could, it would mitigate the draft capital that other teams invested on 2 wide receivers earlier in the draft. In the next round, I drafted Miles Jack, linebacker for the Jaguars, who is now pretty much the only linebacker left after Telvin Smith reported that he's not going to play at all this season. Now, Miles Jack is not the best linebacker in the NFL, but he is in an amazing situation. Last year, Telvin Smith would beat him to a lot of tackles, and he's no longer there. So unless another linebacker that currently isn't on the roster or we've seen play yet can beat him to the football, Miles Jack has the speed and the projected number of tackle opportunities for me to feel comfortable with him as an LB1. So we start 2 linebackers, 2 D linemen, 2 secondary players, and 2 IDP flexes. And I definitely wanted to get my linebackers in a good spot, and I believe those 2 picks give me 2 top 15 linebackers, which is going to be pretty huge with how heavy the tackle settings are in this league. I then followed up that pick immediately in the same round, 9th round, with Adam Humphries, the slot receiver last year of the Bucks and this year of the Titans. I love the way he runs routes on film. He's got the speed to get some chunk plays after the catch. He really reminds me of the Welker Edelman type slot player. Mariota has always been better in the intermediate range than he has down the field, which meshes perfectly with his skill set. I'm not a huge believer in A.J. Brown and don't think he's going to make a seamless transition. With the amount of money they threw at Humphries, I think Brown is not going to see as many targets as Adam, and Delaney Walker is coming back from that gruesome ankle injury, so I like his upside, even in a low passing offense, to at least be a bye week fill-in if Foster has a lower volume role than I expect him to have. The wide receivers and linebackers selected after these 2 picks were Traquan Smith, Avonte David, Zach Cunningham, Deshaun Hamilton, so I'm really glad to get those players where they were taken. I know Humphries' ADP is far lower, but I just stick to the player over the situation that I like when it's this early in the startup. Avonte David is old and now has competition from Devin White for tackles, and Zach Cunningham is solid, but I don't think he has top 10 linebacker potential this season like Miles Jack has. I then grabbed another running back in case of injury that I could possibly flex in Latavius Murray for the Saints, as I don't think Kamara is going to have a full workload that everyone expects or seems to expect right now, as the running backs selected around Murray were Matt Breida, Kalen Ballage, Naheem Hines, Alexander Madison. I'd much rather have Murray over all of them, both because it is possible Kamara could get injured, but I believe he will have a standalone Ingram-esque role in that offense, even if he might not get quite the volume that Ingram was getting before. I then grabbed defensive lineman Dee Ford for the 49ers, who is going to be part of probably the best defensive line group in the NFL next year, with DeForest Buckner, Nick Bosa, Dee Ford, and Eric Armstead all rushing the passer. If you remember the Jaguars from a couple years ago, every single defensive lineman from that group was startable every single week, and after waiting on defensive line for a while, decided I wanted a part of those points. Now, there's an argument that, well, he might not get as many volume stats as a good defensive lineman on a different team. But with the D-line, a lot of these stats bleed over into each other. Say DeForest Buckner gets a sack and causes a fumble, Dee Ford now has a chance to pick that up. Nick Bosa could push the quarterback into Dee Ford. I'd much rather have a good pass rusher with another pass rushing threat on the team than a good pass rusher by himself, as an offense can scheme their protections to stop the pass rush of that one player much more easily. The next 3 D linemen taken behind him were Trey Flowers, Justin Houston, and Montez Sweat, so I felt it was an excellent value pick in that round. Followed up my next pick, getting my number 1 quarterback this year in Drew Lock as my only backup to Aaron Rodgers. I did this both because I didn't want to waste another pick on a quarterback, and also because the Broncos have a bye week 1 week before the Packers bye week. I don't think Joe Flacco is very good. He's never thrown for more than, I believe, 27 touchdowns in his entire career. He didn't look very good last year, and Drew Lock is going to, in my opinion, develop quickly, and I could easily see a scenario in which he is the Broncos starter coming out of their bye week in week 10. If this doesn't happen, then I just have a week where I can't play a quarterback and I have to bite the bullet. But I like Lock's odds of being a starter by week 11. I'm sure far more than most. The next round, so round 13, I took tight end Kahale Warring, who is my number 2 tight end in this class, and what I feel a absolutely tremendous value. So that makes my tight end group George Kittle, Chris Herndon, Mark Andrews, and Kahale Warring, who I believe all can score 40 plus plays, are in systems where they will use the tight end and the coaches know how to utilize the tight end, and all have young quarterbacks, or relatively young, cemented as their quarterback. I also think Lamar Jackson is going to develop into a better passer than many think, which is why I was so high on Mark Andrews. We do have a kicker in this league, and in the next round I took Harrison Butker, as I do think the Chiefs offense is going to be good this year, but I don't expect it to be as efficient as last season without Tyreek Hill for the first probably 8 weeks at minimum, I would say. And as the third kicker off the board, I think he has the potential to be the number 1 scoring kicker this year, so I had to get him. The next round, I got Demario Davis, linebacker for the Saints, who is a great linebacker on a good defense, which means he's going to get less tackle opportunities than on a bad one. But he is so good and so disruptive in sacks and defending passes and forcing fumbles and making tackles in the open field that I really loved that value there, which gave me 3 very solid linebackers that I can rotate in those 2 linebacker positions, but I can also play Demario Davis in one of those flex spots pretty much every week. The next round, I drafted linebacker Jermaine Pratt out of NC State, who was a rookie for the Bengals. They have pretty bad linebackers with Preston Brown, Nick Vigil, and Vincent Ray, I believe, or possibly Justin Evans. I think it's Justin Evans. But Jermaine Pratt is very disruptive, big, long, fast, and has pretty good instincts. So I wanted to take a shot at a high tackle linebacking group and get the cheapest one and youngest one that I think is going to be the best, which is Jermaine Pratt. It might not happen this season, but it almost certainly will happen next season. So I felt this was a great value, even though it's an extreme reach for his ADP. I just had to go with the player I'm most certain takes a starting job. In the following round, I got my second defensive lineman in Denico Autry of the Colts, who was top 15 in points per game last year for defensive linemen and is being severely overlooked. He's tall, fast, uses his hands well, and has a great feel for where the quarterback is going to try to escape the pocket. He does have some injury concerns, but he was being taken right before Grady Jarrett, Sam Hubbard, Damon Harrison, Cameron Hayward, who all are not as good at rushing the passer as Denico Autry. So I feel very comfortable with my D-line and linebacker spots just with those 6 picks. D Ford and Denico Autry are both pass rushers in good situations. Roquan Smith and Miles Jack could easily both be top 15 to top 10 linebackers. Mario Davis is almost assuredly going to be a top 25 linebacker, most likely top 20. And Jermaine Pratt was my upside swing because if he can get a starting role, he could be top 15 to top 20 in tackles as well. I then followed up Denico Autry with my 18th round pick, Jerome Baker, the second-year linebacker in Miami, who is the most athletic linebacker there. And Kiko Alonso has had his share of injury concerns, as has Raekwon McMillan. Unlike Pratt, he is already a starter, but I expect Jerome Baker to have a much better year this season and start taking snaps away from Alonso and McMillan as he improves his overall game, which is already pretty impressive. At this point in the draft, a lot of the good defensive linemen and linebackers had already been taken, and since I only had 3 wide receivers on my team, I started to head that direction. I also hadn't taken a safety yet, which many were overdrafting them, and I took Mohamed Sanu, wide receiver for the Falcons, who saw 96 targets last season, and he is 29, but I'm a fan of his route running, and he's become more of a possession receiver than he used to be. Matt Ryan will throw to pretty much whoever is open, and I think Sanu still maintains about a 700 to 800 yard pace, so I just kind of wanted a floor wide receiver in case one of my 3 guys I really like gets hurt or their role is not what I expect. I then took the second to last strong safety drafted in Malcolm Jenkins, who was a top 15 defensive player in the secondary position last season. I don't exactly know how he slipped other than him being 31, but I was not planning on taking a defensive back unless it was a great value, and this was a great value. My most recent pick was wide receiver Rashard Higgins for the Browns, who is playing ahead of Antonio Callaway right now, and who I believe does have potential for a 4th-year breakout. He looked really good last season on only 56 targets. He's not the most athletic player in the world, but he's improved his route running, his hands, all of the things that I liked about him on film in college. That was either my first or second year scouting, and I believe he was a top 15 wide receiver for me that year until his athletic testing came out, but I believe he has overcome those, and with both of my last 2 picks, Sanu and Higgins, I wanted to target teams where the number 1 wide receiver was going to get a lot of targets, but are high injury risk. Julio Jones is less injury prone than people realize, but he does have that history of foot problems, and big wide receivers don't tend to age very well in the NFL, and he's, I believe, 30 or 31 heading into this year, so I felt Sanu was a good upside play in case he does get hurt, and same with Rashard start Higgins. OBJ has only been healthy one time in his career so far and lasted the whole season. And Odell Beckham is like a 60-65% catch percentage type player, while Landry is about a 60 to 70% catch percentage type player. And while Antonio Callaway is athletic and talented, he's not very technically refined. I went back and watched all of his targets from last year, and the number of drops and miscues and interceptions that were pretty much directly his fault and fumbles was just a lot. With two receivers who are already kind of in that mold, I see Higgins being the third wide receiver as that possession chain mover type guy. Him being able to beat out Callaway so far this spring and off season also led to this decision, and I took him 4 full rounds after Antonio Callaway, and I took Sanu 17 full rounds behind Ridley. So those were kind of my two stopgap picks for the wide receiver position. Sanu, I'm sure, will decline going forward. I just wanted to have another body in case of injury, but Higgins fits the profile of someone that could pull a Tyler Boyd and become a go-to target for his team this year. Unlikely, but again with both of those wide receivers, I'm kind of hoping for a Julio Jones OBJ injury as we're pretty far down in the draft. We still have 12 more rounds to go. But in my trading away of my 2020 first and second round picks to get extra draft capital, I've only got 10 more picks to fill out my roster. I do think there's a couple better teams than mine right now, as it's been a while since I did a startup draft, but over most teams I've got an advantage at tight end, quarterback, and as long as Connor doesn't get hurt or lose a job, running back, with 3 high upside tight ends. 2 of them I expect to break out this season and be startable in my flex. And then I feel I got a lot of value on defense with a lot of top 10, top 20 upside defensive linemen, linebackers, and safeties. So I do believe I will be in the playoff race this year. It's going to be a very interesting league, as a few injuries to each team could make them not able to start an entire position. But now I do feel that I've got good depth and good bye-week coverage at every position, so I can just play the draft as it comes to me going forward without feeling the need to cover any of my bye-week deficiencies. I know that was a lot of talk about a team you don't care about, but I do care about it, and it has been interesting going through this as you start to realize which guys are drafting well and aren't drafting well, so you kind of know who your competition's going to be, you know who the people you want to trade with are, and combining both the offense and defense at such a deep scale is going to be pretty interesting. But now that the draft is starting down, and I'm not as worried about the other guys in this league stealing my targets from listening to my podcast, I decided to do a news and notes episode about all the news that we haven't covered over the last week or so. And then later this week, probably on the weekend, I'm going to have an episode breaking down Paris Campbell's situation with the Colts, and again updating the news and notes. I'm going to go in reverse order for this news, as a lot of the older stuff is going to be updated with newer news if I were to go in the normal order. So Josh Oliver, tight end of the Jaguars, has shown good rapport with Nick Foles. There has been a lot of buzz about Oliver. He cannot block at all, but he could see some year 1 passing targets. I was pretty happy that both he and Dawson Knox were drafted before Kahale. I've actually loved seeing those two get a clear path to playing time right away, as that allows Waring to be a better value. Robbie Gould, the kicker for the 49ers, still doesn't know what he's going to be doing, playing for the 49ers, or sitting out a year, or getting traded, but he is on the franchise tag, and they haven't come to an agreement, but they've got about 20 more days to do that. In news that makes me happy, I passed on Joe Mixon for George Kittle in the startup. The left tackle, Jonah Williams, the rookie from Alabama for the Bengals, tore his labrum and is going to miss the 2019 season, which is a big blow to an already bad offensive line. So not only is this going to open up fewer running lanes, but Andy Dalton is not very good at handling pressure, so it's kind of a double whammy for that offense in both sides. Zeke Elliott is not expected to be extended this season, as they'd like to re-sign Amari Cooper and Dak Prescott first. Makes pretty good sense with Zeke not being able to show he can handle his off-the-field issues, even though he is a great running back. Ravens tight end Hayden Hurst is questionable for training camp with a hamstring. This is kind of the proof of why I don't like investing in guys with injuries below the shin, as he had foot surgery last year and then came back with 20 more pounds of muscle but pulled his hamstring, most likely due to his body being off balance from the foot surgery. A lot of people are still holding out hope for Hayden Hurst, and he might end up having a role as a pass catcher on that team, but I prefer Mark Andrews by a wide margin. Russell Wilson has been encouraged by how quickly DK Metcalf has picked up the Seahawks offense. Quote, he's really intelligent, he really understands the game really well, he takes coaching really well, he gets extra work, he's a legit pro wide receiver. So that's good, but Russell Wilson probably isn't going to say anything bad about his teammates, but you know I'm very high on Metcalf, so I will choose to take this as a confirmation of that. New Packers coach Matt LaFleur has implied that Aaron Rodgers will not have complete control at the line of scrimmage. This is probably a good thing for Aaron Rodgers, as there's been a lot of issues with him and his old head coach trying to run different plays, the receivers running different plays than what Aaron Rodgers wanted. And he basically just said, with the offense, it's not really designed for all plays to be audibled by the quarterback. He's a very smart player, so I'm sure Rodgers is going to be able to, but I do think it would be good for him to trust in the system a little bit and get the run game going to open up the play action, especially with these young but promising wide receivers that the Packers have. There was a lot of concern about Sony Michel having a knee scope running back for the Patriots, but apparently he's been running at full tilt, so everyone's fear that Sony Michel is doomed and Damien Harris is the new guy lasted about 2 weeks, in my opinion, but I'm sure Damien Harris is going to still have his truthers and believers. I would not touch him in the second round of any rookie draft, and that's where everyone's taking him, so every time he's drafted, I love it. This is coming from Pete Carroll, so you have no idea if it's true, but he said 7th round wide receiver John Ursua is a candidate to play the slot. Quote, he started to show us the kind of quicks and change of direction stuff that made him one of the big scorers in college football last year. You can see it, he's got a real style to him. He's a slot guy, he really is that mold. Well, that makes sense, but that's really not saying anything other than he watched his college film. So this is still a deep stash candidate that likely won't have any year one value. Redskins coach Jay Gruden said that second-year wide receiver Trey Quinn has taken over the inside slot role and has apparently been one of the standouts of the offseason program. That's good to hear. I was not a fan of his film last season on the field, as he looked pretty scared and then got hurt, but the Redskins are probably going to be behind in a lot of games, so he could be a nice target volume play. Darren Waller, tight end for the Raiders, has been one of their most impressive players in the offseason. Hard to know if John Gruden is telling the truth or not, but Waller is entering a team that threw it a bunch last year and may or may not have gotten better on defense. So he again is another late round dart throw for tight end production just based on target volume. The Falcons coach Dan Quinn said that Devontae Freeman has looked like himself this offseason. Well, the oft-injured running back has been a good player for a while, but injuries, as always, are the concern with him. I have heard reports that their offensive line is also looking better, so for his price, he's a great buy, but not the type of guy you want to build your team around. In bad news for James Conner, running back Jalen Samuels of the Steelers said he worked on speed this offseason to become a better pure runner. He believes he's faster now and can get in and out of his cuts a little bit better. I don't think athleticism is the issue with Samuels. I think he needs to become a better running back. So as a Conner owner, this is actually kind of good, but we won't know till we see him on the field. He is an athletic player and probably will produce if Conner goes down, but I agree with RotoWorld in that he'll likely see some touches as a backup runner and maybe even as a receiver split out with Antonio Brown leaving and not a lot of proven depth behind him. Wide receiver Albert Wilson of the Dolphins could miss the start of training camp with that hip injury and could be on the PUP list, but he's apparently still on track for week 1. A hip injury does make me nervous as there's a lot of moving parts in there as well, and it can really throw off your gait and your back. Marquez Valdes-Scantling, receiver for the Packers, has reportedly been the clear number 2 wideout through the offseason and has beaten out Geronimo Allison. It's all still the offseason, so it's hard to really tell, and I really didn't love his film last year as I thought his athletic testing didn't match his on-field athleticism, but he is an excellent gamble to make his second-year leap. I do find both he and Allison to be a little bit overvalued right now with all the uncertainty on who gets the targets, while also transitioning to a run-first philosophy offensive coordinator. Now, they probably won't be all run-first, but I do expect a lot more running than the second most pass attempts in the NFL last season. Running back Tariq Cohen for the Bears doesn't expect his role to change, which I would agree with. He's a gadget player, a very good gadget player, but he is just so tiny. He'll still have a role. He'll still break some big plays now and then. Former first-round draft pick and current wide receiver for the Giants, Corey Coleman, is the front-runner for the Giants' number 3 receiver job. This is relevant as the Giants are likely going to be behind in a lot of games, but I really don't want any part of an Eli Manning, Daniel Jones-led offense. I do like Daniel Jones. I have him a clear tier below Locke and Murray. There's been no update on Josh Gordon's indefinite suspension, wide receiver for the Patriots. I've seen a lot of buzz that he could be back. I do not want to own him. Not only does he have the incapability of staying out of trouble with the NFL, his skills declined severely last year compared to what they were before his first suspension, and so I don't anticipate him having a long career even if he does come back. Cardinals coach Cliff Kingsbury expects a really nice role for second-year running back Chase Edmonds. He did steal a lot of work from David Johnson last year, which was kind of surprising, and he is a good little player. Apparently Matt Stafford, quarterback for the Lions, had some broken bones in his back last year, which would explain his lack of mobility, but not the complete lack of mobility we saw last season. He is a good candidate to bounce back with one new receiving weapon in TJ Hawkinson, but he's still an avoid for me, as I don't expect him to return to his former volume-driven pass numbers that he had before Patricia became the head coach of the Lions. Apparently, wide receiver Dante Moncrief for the Steelers is supposed to be a slam dunk number 2 receiver. Hard for me to comment on this one way or the other, as I haven't seen them all play. I do think it's going to end up being Juju Smith-Schuster and everyone else when it's all said and done. Tight end Mo Alley Cox for the Colts is looking very good, with one reporter from The Athletic predicting a breakout season. I don't know how that's going to happen with Ebron and Jack Doyle in front of him on the depth chart, but Ebron does only have 1 year left, so it is possible. Dante Pettis, wide receiver for the 49ers, has been being talked up a lot as a breakout candidate. I loved Pettis last year. I would love having him this year as well. He was stolen from me 2 picks before my pick in the startup draft, which is unfortunate, but that's how these drafts go. You just have to move on to the next pick and not really worry about what happened before. That's all the news and notes we've got for today. Your happy song of the day is The Show Must Go On by Queen, and your football song is Enter the Ninja by Dee Anford. Those links can be found in the episode description. As always, if you want to support what I'm doing, you can head to patreon.com/365_dynasty. Again, we're going to have a Paris Campbell breakdown coming up soon, and the episode frequency should be getting up to about 3 a week again. You've been listening to Dynasty 365, where the film will set you free.
So much trouble, it's not my fault, all this I lose my friends, I lost my baby that was looking crack, only today want to change. He wanted us on the cougar tribal like to feel. I'd scale the bill, take your life in a second. The devil drinks coffee in my kitchen, I mentioned in every song, I just wanted to go away. You decide to stay in the well. I want to be forgiven, I don't like this kid for money. Sorry I was scared, you're not the way it feels. Like to sleep waiting for someone to come in and kill you. The final thing is that now we're not friends of anything. Go they gonna kill anyone that feels so powerful. They trip by you, I read your skin up, everything is confusing. You will be good, but you will be more. You will be good, but you will be